To understand what the system that we will be creating today is, let me explain where it comes from. Helldivers 2 is a game developed by the Swedish game studio Arrowhead. Other than Helldivers, another fantastic game series they have developed is Magica. In Helldivers, you spread managed democracy and liberty across the stars. To accomplish this, the players, known as Helldivers, make use of stratagems. Powerful abilities calling down support from command ships in orbit. These stratagems range from additional weaponry like machine guns and rocket launchers to powerful orbital lasers. To call down these powerful weapons to bear upon your enemy, the player engage in a minigame where the player needs to complete a series of input commands to form a sequence which activates the possibility to call down the stratagem. This is the system that we will be recreating today. We will create a system that is incredibly easy to expand upon to create new stratagems, while also keeping it very easy to make use of as well. Here's a short demonstration of what we will be creating. In this case here, I will activate the stratagem menu, I will call down a smoke screen, and I can throw the stratagem away. Then I'll do an airstrike with another combination, and I'll throw that stratagem away, and it will explode. So that's the basic framework that we will be creating today in this series. The whole code system will be available in this tutorial. The UI itself is an extra that's available for those of you that want to get the project off of Patreon. Let's check it out. So here we are inside of Unreal Engine, and this is the third person template that we're using as sort of our base to save a little bit of time. And the very first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating the actual stratagems, the abilities that we throw away, sort of like a grenade that lands on the floor and then has a certain effect. So to do this, we have this structure here. We're going to be creating a new folder. We can call this stratagem. And inside of there, we're going to be creating a new blueprint class of the type actor. We can call this BP underscore stratagem ability or something like that. So this class will be pretty simple. In essence, actually, let's go to editor preferences and make sure that we have main windows set so that all our new windows are actually automatically docked up here. In the event graph, we're going to remove the tick, we're going to remove the begin overlap, and on the begin play, we're going to be saying that we want a thing to fly. To have a visual representation, we'll start off by creating a static mesh, and our static mesh could be something like a sphere or something like that. The default ones are a little bit big, so we're going to be creating our own one pretty quickly here. So we go to modeling, and we click on sphere. And we say we want a radius of 10, and then we say we want to put it over there, and that looks like a perfectly good stratagem grenade kind of object, right? So we say accept, press Ctrl B, we get to go to the actual object itself, and we're going to be moving it to our stratagem folder, over here, like so. Then we're going to rename it. We can call it SM for static mesh, and then we can call it stratagem sphere. This sphere will not have any collision to begin with, so we'll just add collision, simplified spherical collision like so. Close, save. That should probably be fine for us. Now that we have our static mesh here, we're going to be choosing the static mesh that we created and put it inside of here. So we can see that this is what it looks like. It got its anchor point, its pivot point in the bottom. Maybe it should have been in the center. Not a huge deal. If you want to, you can move that around, of course. We're going to be moving this to our root so that it replaces the root. And from here, we're going to be saying that we want to change some collision settings. So it's going to be collisioning everything that's dynamic, block all dynamic. You can see here everything is blocked here. We want to change this to custom, and we want to ignore pawns because we don't want our pawn to be affected by this. We just want it to go through our pawn in this case. If you want to throw it on something like a pawn in your game or something, of course, you need to have other collision settings. This is just to make sure that it's going out as expected. In addition to this, we want to add a projectile component, and this is so that we can have some basic projectile movement inside of our object as well. And yeah, so we're going to be taking this projectile movement, and then we're going to be saying that we want to set velocity in local space. This is so that it gets its velocity based on its own direction inside of local space, and we want to say essentially move forward. So let's predict something like 600 and maybe 600 upwards also. So that will be sort of like an upwards throwing ability now with these settings here. After that, we may want to wait a little bit before some effect happens. So let's put in something like a delay duration, something like that. We want the duration type to be of the type float, so we can have a value there for it. Let's say we want to put 3 seconds or something like that. So now we can put in a delay and have it delay for this amount of time. So we're going to be delaying for 3 seconds, and then we're going to be having something happen. In this case, we're going to be adding a special effect to demonstrate that something is happening, so a visual effect. In this case, if we go back to selection, we don't have any visual effects available here, so we're just going to be adding the starter content. So go up here to feature, content pack, content, and starter content. So now we'll be able to get a few basic special effects that we can add to our objects. So just something very simple. Can close that out for now and cancel like so. Going to our starter content, we can navigate down to particles, and inside of here we have, for example, an explosion. So let's get our explosion into our little object here. So we add something like particle cascade particle effect component, because this happens to be an old legacy particle system from the cascade system. So now we have an explosion here. We should probably name this something like particle effect to be a little bit more generic. After our duration, we're going to be saying activate. In this case, the particle effect itself is going to be set to auto-activate, I believe. Let's see. Auto-activate, like so. So now it's going to activate only after this timer has happened here. Okay, and then after that, maybe we want to take our static mesh, and we might want to say something like toggle visibility, so that it isn't shown anymore, so our sphere actually disappears. Okay, so let's try this out and see how this works. We want to open up our third-person character. We can find it in the third-person folder, and let's add a button, something like that, and then we'll say spawn actor class. So, and then we'll get our transform, and we'll put that inside of the transform here, and we'll say we want to add our, or create our stratagem ability class that we just created for now. So if we start and we press 1, we're throwing away our little object. It doesn't do anything with the floor, and then it disappears. So few things we want to do. One is we want to get rid of this object that we created earlier, like so. Second thing we want to do is go to our camera boom and say that we don't want to make a collision test, because we could see that our camera get affected by this actor that we had here. Then we want to go to our mesh, so we go to our stratagem ability, our static mesh. We find our static mesh over here. We open that one up and we change its collision settings from complex collision as simple to simple collision as complex. So close that down and we throw it away again, and we can see it now lands on the ground and then it detonates and vanishes. Okay, the explosion might be a little bit small. Maybe we want to scale that up a bit, maybe make it 5 times as large, something like that. Anyway, so now we have our basic ability. So this is the base class. Let's create a child class. Let's call that one Airstrike. And then let's duplicate that and let's call that one Smoke Screen, something like that. So our base class has now gotten the explosion, which means that our Airstrike will have it as well, which might be a suitable effect for it. Our smoke screen, however, may want to have some other kind of effect. So if we go back to our starter content and our particles, you can see we have a steam lit here, or a smoke perhaps. Let's take our smoke and let's go and change the particle effect to be smoke over there. And now to test that out, let's change to our smoke screen ability instead. So we throw it away and we hopefully disappear and get a bit of smoke. Yeah, okay, so now we have our basic abilities that we can actually play with for our stratagem system. So that's a good start. Now we want to create a compartmentalized piece of code to have all of our code related to our stratagems. So what we will be doing is we will be creating a blueprint class of the type actor component. We'll call it BPC and then stratagems. And inside of here we want to have our functionality related to our stratagems. Starting off, we may want to have a button or an input that allows us to throw the stratagem ability that we created. So let's go to input and input action. And we can call this throw stratagem. Inside of that, we'll just make sure it's a digital. We don't really need anything more than that. We can create a mapping context as well. Input mapping context, we'll call it IMC standard controls or something like that. Inside of here, we will add our mapping that we created, our throw stratagem, and we can put it on our, let's say, our left mouse button. That should be okay. Okay, and then we'll save and we'll add here throw stratagem. So on the event of throw stratagem is happening, we can throw our ability. To keep track of this, we'll create a variable here. We will say that it's going to be of active stratagem. We can call it of the type BP stratagem ability and of the type class reference. This class reference we will be doing a check against. We'll do a validated get to make sure that we actually have it active. And if it is triggered and we have it active, actually let's put it on started instead. I like that one better. Then we want to do the code that we did previously. So we go to our third person character. We can take this code, cut it out, we don't need it anymore. And we go back to our component and we add it in here. And if it is valid, we're gonna be spawning this stratagem. We won't be getting this transform, however. We will be getting our owner. And this actor we will be getting the transform for. Get transform, and we'll use that like so. So the idea here is that our third person character will be having this blueprint component for stratagems on it, and by having it on him, we will be getting that actor transform to create our projectile, which we will be throwing ahead of ourselves. After having used this, we will then be clearing out this variable because we're only able to use it once. So that's the basic throwing functionality that we're going to be having for this. So we'll save that for now. To make use of this function now and test it out, we can go to our third-person character. And in addition to its mapping context it's already adding here, we can add another mapping context. And we'll choose the one that's called standard controls that we just created. And we'll hook it up. And let's see if we can, if we go to our stratagems here, we go and set this to a class by default. Let's do the airstrike one. Go in and left click and we can throw away our airstrike and it will explode. There we go. So that works. So we'll go back to our stratagem again and we clear that out so we don't have one by default. Like so. Now one of the things that happens in the game is that when you press down a certain key, the same key setup that you're using to move your character is now being used for like these stratagem mini games. So we're using the same controls, but we're in a different context. So to create a situation like that for us, we are going to be going to our third-person character, which already has a mapping context over here called default. And we will be creating a copy of that, a duplicate, and we'll move it into our stratagem folder, like so. And inside of here, we're going to be calling this context like stratagem input, something like that. This is the context that will be running whenever we're in this special mode. Did I name that incorrectly? I think this one was the one I was supposed to rename. Yeah, it was. Okay. So let's go back and rename this one general controls or something like that. Maybe it was standard controls. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. This one we will be calling stratagem inputs. Inside of this one, again opening up the wrong one. Here we go. We have our jump inputs and our move inputs and look inputs and stuff like that. What we want to do here is we can remove the look and the jump completely. We don't need those. And we want to have something very similar to how the move is set up. So what we'll do is we'll go to our third-person character again, to our input and then our actions, and we'll duplicate the move. And we'll drag it to our stratagem folder, like so. And instead we'll call this one input action stratagem input. Okay, so inside of our stratagem inputs context, we'll change from IA move to stratagem input, and we will keep all of these different inputs the same. The gamepad one doesn't, actually it might be fine as well. But anyway, so this is us using our WASD keys and up, down, right, left for our combinations. And this will be fine. So now that we have that, we can go over here and inside of our component we can say stratagem input. So on this event, we will be getting some information here that we want to process in some way. So in the case of the game, we have for the most part up, down, left, right to control something. So this action value here will contain the information of what we're putting in. So we'll create a function called translate input to stratagem input. We'll make sure that the input to this is a 2D vector, like so, and action value, I believe it was called, like so. So if we go back, we can call on this function, say that on started, send in our action value over here, and then we'll get some value output that we want to have. Okay, so now we need to translate this somehow. To make this a little bit more readable, I'm going to be creating a macro, and we will be calling this input translation. And as an input, we will be taking two inputs. One of them is going to be the vector 2D, so we'll call that the action value. The other one will be an execution type node, and we'll call that one execute, so that the text disappears. As outputs, we are going to be having 4 different, actually let's make 5 different execution pins, like so. And we'll call them up and down and left and right. And then we can call the last one can't interpret input. So we can have that as a fallback if we want to do, for example. From here, we are going to be breaking the input here, or the vector. And then from that, we're going to be doing a sequence node, and we'll add 2 more pins to it. We're doing 4 different comparisons here. So we'll add 4 different branches, and we'll hook them up to each, like so. And this is not going really well, but okay. And what we want to do here is we want to compare our values. So in the case of y, we want to, let's reroute that a little bit and say, is this value greater than 0? If it is, then this is an up input. If this value is less than 0, then this is a down input. Then we're going to do the same comparison for x. So we reroute that one and we say, is this one greater than 0? And let's see here, if x is greater than 0, that means it should be right, I do believe. Let's go with right and change it in case if it turns out to be wrong. And then from this we're going to compare against less than 0, and we're going to assume that that is the left one, like so. So now that we have this macro, we can use this macro here to input our translation, do our input translation. Might want to change it to something like translate input, actually. Have the proper verbiage. So we send it in like so, and then let's do some prints here. So print, like so, just to debug that our functionality is as expected. So we'll say this one is right, we'll say this one is left, say this one is down, and this one is up. Okay. The only problem now is that we're translating this on this input, but we don't have this input action actually being used. So we go to our third-person character and change our mapping context from the default that it has to our stratagem inputs. So now when we play, we should immediately be getting those values. So if we put a breakpoint over here and I press W, you can see that we're getting into this code now. So let's resume. We can see that it says up when I press W, S is down, D is right, and A is left. So we have a translation now from our inputs into something that is similar to how Helldivers use their stratagem minigame inputs. So it's a good first start here, at least. Now, from the point that we are going to be making this translation further into an object that we can have a sort of a container for potential information that we want to show, like for example in our user interface. So what we will be doing is we'll be creating another folder here. We can call this Stratagem inputs, and inside of this one we will be creating a blueprint, and we'll open up here and we'll say we want to have a data asset, and we want to have a primary data asset. So this will be PDA Stratagem input. This one will be sort of our base class for our different inputs, and inside of here we could, for example, add a image which would be a texture 2D type, where we could have our arrows to show what they represent. So these would in this case then be needing 4 different inputs for up, down, left, right. So if we create a data asset now from our PDA Stratagem input, we can call this DA underscore up, and we can duplicate that one and create another one for down, and duplicate that one and create another one for right, and duplicate again to create one for left. So the reason we create these is because now we have these different objects that we could potentially have information inside of to make use of in different places. So when we translate this input over here, we want to make use of these different input types that we've created. So inside of our translate input to stratagem input, we are going to be saying that, okay, well this function should be returning a type of PDA Stratagem input, like so, and we'll call this our Stratagem input. And this is because we will be essentially feeding this information to our different stratagems that we have equipped. So they will themselves be doing the matchmaking to see if you're doing the proper combinations for them. So in this case, if we do a return, we can create a local variable. We can call this local variable something like local stratagem input. Then unhook that. Actually, we want to still keep that one hooked. And then we want to create a set over here and create 4 copies. Do it like so. So now we can define what these stratagem inputs, data assets that we're creating from this. So since we have created 4, the up one will obviously have the data assets for up, we will have one for down, we will have one for left, and we will have one for right. So leaving this function now, we will have a stratagem input that represents the input that we have translated this from. So now we want to essentially inform all of our different stratagems that this is the input that we have gotten. So let's create another function and call this something like process input. And inside of here we will be getting a input variable of this type stratagem input that we just created. So stratagem input. And then we want to send to our different stratagems that this is the input that we have gotten, do with it what you will. So this is a good time now to actually add our stratagem class then to have it actually be able to process this information. So we are again going to be using some data assets for this functionality. So let's create another folder. We'll call this one again stratagem. This is maybe not the best structure here, but just to have it a little bit segregated. So starting off, we'll create a blueprint class again. We'll create data asset and make sure it's a primary data asset. We'll call it PDA Stratagem. It's a good name here, I think. And inside of this one, we can have a few different variables to keep track of what this is. So starting off, a name would be good. If we want to have it translatable, it's good to have it of the type text. Inside of it, we might also want to have our ability. So this refers to the ability that I created earlier. So our BP strategy ability class reference. So this will be the different classes that are spawned from the different stratagems that we complete. Since we're going to be doing a matching functionality inside of here, we're going to be creating a index, let's call it current evaluation index of the type integer. So this will be what's actually measuring where we are inside of our combination. And then we want to have something that actually contains our actual combination itself. So we can call this stratagem combination, for example. And this should be of the type PDA stratagem input, object reference, and make sure that it's an array. So this array will contain our combination that we want to complete to have this work. Okay, so now that we have this, what do we want to do? Well, let's start up with some functionality that we can make use of. Since this will be our primary data asset, this is code that can run on all the different data assets that we create from this class. So an init function might be good. An init function like something simple, probably want to have something like setting our current evaluation index to 0. We want to have a function to actually process an input. So process new stratagem input. It will be taking an input of the type PDA stratagem, like so. Can call it also stratagem input or new stratagem input, something like that. And what we're going to be doing here is fairly simple. We're going to be taking our array that we have of our existing combinations, and we're going to be taking our current evaluation index, and we're going to be saying, well, in this array, if we get a copy of this index, will it be matching this one? So we do a comparison to see if the current symbol that we are expecting is matching here, then we're in a good spot. So then we're going to be saying, okay, we actually succeeded in this. So we will be taking our evaluation index and then we'll be incrementing it to begin with, because the next one should be checking against the next array index. But we also might want to tell people that this is going well. We're currently still matching. So we create an event dispatcher saying something like stratagem combination matched. So if anyone is interested, combination match, okay, got the right name. Like so, we call it and say this was a match. So if someone is interested, then they can hook into this and do something if they want to. The alternative here is that we did not match. At that point, we're going to say, okay, well, we failed our current match, so we're going to be resetting our evaluation and start from scratch because we failed the combination. In addition to that, we might want to tell people about that as well. So we'll create another one saying stratagem combination failed, and do an event dispatcher for that. Also, to have some sort of debug information for us, we might want to do something like a print text here saying how is this going, and format the text and say something along the lines. We might want to have this specific stratagem, so we'll do bracket name. Well, not brackets, it's called, I'm not sure what this is called in English, but this squiggly parentheses name and then failed. So the name it wants to have in here is going to be this name that we created over here. So this way we have some debugging information to see if we're going to be matching our things. In addition to that, we'll hook up another one up here. So make sure that our match happened here. So we have some debug information there as well. In addition to that, we want to actually check also if we have matched something. Did we actually complete the whole combination? Because that could be a possibility at this point. So we'll create another branch here, and we want to do that comparison. How we do that is we're going to be taking our current evaluation index, and we're going to be checking this against our array. So our array, if we give ourselves a little bit of space, we're going to be checking the length of this array. So in the case that our array index is greater than or equal to, I believe, then we are now at a point where we have fulfilled the whole array with matches, so now we have actually succeeded. So at this point we might want to do another print, and we might want to do another event dispatcher saying stratagem successful. Call that here, get some print information, and hook that up. And let's say that this is a success. Okay, so now we have pretty much all the logic that we need to actually do the actual comparison to. So going back to our component, we want to process our input. We want to now go through different stratagems to send them this input. So to do that, we need to first have an array of stratagems. So we can say that this is actually, let's call it equipped stratagems. We'll make them of the type PDA stratagem and make that an array. This array, we're going to be saying we want to go through this one, loop through it, and we want to call process new stratagem input. And we hook that up. So we get an input, we translate it, we send it to all our different stratagems, and they will keep track of the matching. That's essentially what's happening right here. Other than that, we can say we're pretty much done in this function for now. So let's create a couple of stratagems to have something to play around with. So we go to miscellaneous, we create a data asset, we choose the PDA stratagem, we call this DA_airstrike, and open that one up. We can give it a name, we can call it airstrike. We can say it needs to use the ability airstrike that we created earlier. Evaluation will leave at 0. And in addition to this, we also want to add a stratagem combination now. So let's say we wanted to have something, I don't know, 5 elements long. We can now say that, okay, our combination to create this would be first right, and then you maybe would do an up, and after that you'll do maybe a down, and then you'll do another right, and then you'll do a left, for example. So now we created our combination for this specific data asset airstrike. We close this one down, we create another one, and we go data asset, we go another stratagem, call this data asset smoke screen. Let's make this one similar but a little bit simpler. So smoke screen, make sure that we have the right ability. We add a few different elements here. Let's say we wanted to have something like, I don't know, down, down, up, right. Okay, so now we have 2 different abilities that are technically being able to run. So in our event graph now here, we make sure to process our input and send in our stratagem input into them. So every time we're pressing a button here, we're going to be translating it into up, down, left, or right, which will be creating a data asset for that. We'll send that data asset over here, where we will be going through all our equipped different stratagems and sending this information to them. In this case, we don't have any equipped stratagems, so let's create two. We'll make sure that we have an airstrike and a smoke screen. Each of these data assets will then be getting this information, and they will be going through this code and saying, if it matches, we'll be getting some debug information. If it doesn't match, it'll say that it doesn't match. And if it's successful, it will be saying that it's successful. Okay, so let's try this out and see how this works. Now the text might be a little bit small, so it might be a bit difficult to follow, but if I press, for example, up now, you can see that it says up, and it says airstrike matched. And if I press up again now to get the message, it says airstrike failed. So the information that's happening here is updating as we're pressing. Now I press down, it says smoke screen matched, down again, smoke screen matched. If I do up now, it says matched, and if I press right now, it should be saying success. So we are getting this feedback that we are expecting, but there is some irregularities. What's going on here is that we have our airstrike. If we open that one on, you can see that it has a current evaluation index of 1. And if we go to our smoke screen, it has an evaluation of 4. Because data assets can keep track of changes in their variables in runtime and also when you're running in the editor between different sessions. These values can be persistent, sort of. So that's why it might be behaving a little bit weird to begin with here, but that's fine. Everything seems to be working as expected at this point, at least. So let's fix some of these things and allow us to add some mobility disabling. In this case, in our component, we're going to be wanting to store our player controller. So we'll create a blueprint interface. Call this BPI get player controller. Inside of that, we'll call a function get player controller. And as a return value, we will have a player controller type. We'll name it player controller. Compile, save, close that down, go to our third person character, and then we go to class settings and we add an interface of the type BPI get player controller. Compile and save, we go to interfaces, get player controller. From here, we get our get controller from pawn. So here we go. Make sure to cast this to player controller because that's what we need to return. Like so. In our component, we can now say we want to get our owner, and that's going to be the third person character. We're going to say get player controller. It will then tell us what the player controller is. We will save it so we have this as a reference for later. I'm going to rename this player controller ref. And the reason for this is because we want to be able to do some mapping context changes. So to do that and disable movement, we're going to be adding some helper functions. So remove IMC, and it's going to be having an input of a mapping context. We call this IMC to remove, and we duplicate that one and call this one add IMC. IMC to add. So here we can add and remove mapping context now. If we go to a third person character, we can check in the event graph how it is happening. We're going to be getting from our player controller our local player subsystem, and then we add a mapping context, for example, like this. So we copy this code, we go over here, we get our player controller reference, we hook this up, and then we hook up the input variable here. So now we are adding the context that we're sending in here. we want to do something very similar to our remove mapping context code. So we go into that one, copy, drag in, but instead of adding, we're going to be doing a remove mapping context, like so. And then we add or remove this context. This allows us to have the ability to switch between contexts. So if we now go and say in our general controls that we want to have some more functionality, we can do that. First, we add a input action. We can call this IA enter stratagem mode. And in our general controls, we add a mapping, call it the enter stratagem mode. Default key will be control. Save, close. And going to our component now, we can go to our event graph and we can say enter stratagem mode and have an event for that. So when we press control, this will be happening. And now we want to be doing some things with our different contexts. So we want to create two more functions. One called adjust contexts for entering stratagem mode. This is very long, but if you want to have a better name and you know one, feel free to do so. We're going to have one also called adjust contexts for leaving stratagem mode. So what we will be doing is, if we go back, is we want to have an entering mode when we press the started, and when we either get cancelled or complete, we want to have something that adjusts for leaving the mode. So holding down the control key will enter, and then letting go of the key will leave. Which means that we want to adjust context when we're entering, which means we want to disable movement and we want to enable these stratagem inputs that we have down here. So to do that, we can add some functionality through variables. We can say an IMC to add. We can type in the type mapping context, like so, and we compile and we say that, okay, the mapping context we want to add when we enter the mode is going to be stratagem inputs. The IMC we want to remove is going to be how we currently are controlling our character, which is going to be our not general controls, but the IMC default is what it's called. So when we adjust the controls for entering the mode, that means that we will be adding a mapping context of the type our controls, and we will be removing the context for moving around. And then we're done here. When we go back and go into the one for leaving stratagem mode, we want to again add our ability to move around, which was what we have as our remove. And then we want to remove the context that we have that allows us to actually process the inputs, which is the one that we have as IMC to add. Okay, so now we should theoretically be able to press down control and this should be happening. However, in our third-person character, we are adding our stratagem mode, stratagem inputs instead of having our IMC default. So changing this back now, we have our movement here. We have our keys to enter stratagem mode here, and also throwing our stratagem if we have it equipped. And yeah, this should be enough for us to test if this works. So we go on to our map, we play, we walk around, everything is fine. We hold down control, we press W, ASD, you can see that we are doing our comparisons, our processing of our inputs. We let go of control and we can now move around again. So the functionality seems to be working as expected now, which is good. So let's create another function that allows us to initialize our stratagems. We can call this init stratagems. This will be a function that we call immediately after we press our control. and we'll want to make sure that our stratagems are in the proper order at this point. So for one thing, we want to make sure that our currently active stratagem is nulled out if we have one. So if we had an airstrike and then we go in again, it's going to be null and void. After that, we want to go through our different equipped stratagems, and we want to initialize those as well. I do believe that we created an initialization function for all of them. So we go here and go init. Yes, we did. Good job, us. So there we have initialization, which sets the different indexes down to 0, essentially saying that it's done to do this. In addition to that, we may want to inform someone that we are entering start input mode. So we could create a event dispatcher saying stratagem start input, and call that at this point. So here we're done with all the initializations. If you wanted to hook onto an event, we could have that one over there, and then return like so. But we also have a situation where when a stratagem is completed, we want to be able to equip a weapon or a stratagem to throw as well. So these stratagems over here, we can actually bind an event for stratagem successful, which is when the combination is completed. At that point, we can go here. And here we want to have an event. So what we can do here is we can create an event, and we can say create a matching event. There we go. It creates it in here, which is not great, but I guess that's fine. Let's do it like this. Let's remove this for now, because I do want to have in stratagem successful here. We want to say which stratagem is it that has succeeded. So we add an input and say PDA stratagem object reference successful stratagem, and then we refresh this one so it gets the proper name, and we get a reference to self and send it in there. Now on the side of the component, we can refresh this one and create an event over here like so, and we can say we want to create a matching event, stratagem successful like so. What we want to do here is we want to take our stratagem and we want to get the ability, because the ability is the class that we're actually able to throw around, right? So we're going to be setting our active stratagem to be this at this point. Like so. The problem here is that it doesn't really allow us to have this function in here, or this event in here, because this is a function. So we're going to be cutting this out. And we're going to be going to our, where are we? Where's the event? There we go, event graph. And in here we can just paste this out and refresh, like so. Save, and then we go back to our init stratagems over here. Now we should be able to choose our stratagem successful here. Compile, save, and it should be hooking up to our event now in our event graph when this happens. So this will be called at that point. So yeah, let's see if we can get this to work. If we go to our stratagems and our smoke screen, our current combination were down, down, up, right. So if we go here and we say control down, down, up, right, it says success. I let go, I press my key, I throw away a stratagem, it creates the smoke. I can't click anymore, nothing is happening, because after one use it is gone. So at this point it is working as intended. Let's double check to see if the airstrike works as well. So the airstrike is right, up, down, right, left. Let's see if we can pull that off. We go into stratagem mode. We go right, up, down, right, left. It says airstrike success. We click. We throw away a stratagem and it should be exploding, and it does. So we are now able to create these different stratagems very, very easily. All we need to do is create a duplicate of one of these stratagems, call it resupply. We add a few different stratagem combinations, we change the name, we change which ability, we create an ability, and that's all you need to do, and it just works with the system that we have built now currently. Now, this is all the code base that is made in the tutorial. In addition to this, I will be adding a UI interface on top of this. This will be available as a Patreon project for those that support me on Patreon, and thank you if you do. So let's take a look at what that will look like as well. Here we can see what the Patreon project gets in addition to everything else. So the code system is completely like it is in the tutorial. The only thing that you get extra is the user interface that also gives you some feedback on your usage of the actual stratagems, so that you can essentially have an easier time doing the combinations. So yeah, that's available if you support me on Patreon, and thanks if you do. Keep on learning. Take care. A big thank you to all of you who like, comment, subscribe and share my videos, or through other means support this channel. You are what makes this channel grow and become a resource for other people to learn from.